at such short notice. Thank you to you, Mr. Belder, and to the AGC Transatlantic Institute. It's very appreciated. Before starting, I would just like to make two sort of brief comments. And one is really that just to say that almost everyone in Iran is affected by the human rights situation. And everyone finds himself on some sort of spectrum of suffering. And of course, there are some people who are on the edge of that spectrum, others less so. But everyone is on that spectrum. And I'm very sorry that I'm not able to speak about everyone today, but that I can only speak about the situation of the Baha'is, because simply that is the only group that we have precise and confirmed information about. The second issue I wanted to mention is that I think it is very important that we focus not only on some of the very recent atrocities that have been happening, and really where hundreds of thousands of people are losing their lives, and which really fill all of us, I think, with outrage and heartbreak. But that we, by meetings like this, show that there is really an equal sense of urgency to address human rights situations and persecutions that have been lasting decades, that are systematic, and that are also concerning hundreds of thousands of people, and that have as its objective simply the extermination of these same people. When the Iran delegation of the European Parliament visited Tehran in December 2013, I was briefed by one of its members upon the return of the delegation. And she told me that, you know, whenever we tried to talk in the conversation with the authorities, when we tried to talk about the Baha'is, it was as though there was a sudden wall that went up and you couldn't continue the conversation. When last year Iran's parliament came to visit the European Parliament, I remember the vice president of the Iran delegation here in the parliament, Mrs. Cornelia Ernst, really with a true sense of humility. She said, you know, Europe's human rights situation is far from being perfect, but that doesn't prevent us from talking or being concerned about human rights situations elsewhere. And she said there's three issues that are of particular concern. She said one is the death penalty. The other one is the situation of women. And the third one is freedom of religion and belief, and particularly the Baha'is. On the first two issues, the representatives of the Iranian government really gave extensive explanations and elaborations as to why the situation or the death penalty was necessary, and why the situation of women was as it is. On the issue of the Baha'is, the representative, and I remember his words, he said, as to that group you mentioned, they even have special privileges. He did not bring it upon himself to say the name Baha'i, and he named that group a group, even though it's the largest non-religious Muslim minority in the country. This unwillingness to do anything about the human rights situation of the Baha'is, or even to have a conversation about the Baha'is, is something we've been witnessing for years. And it is very difficult to understand, especially because Baha'is have because of their beliefs, political aspirations, whether in Iran or elsewhere. They're not part of any political ideology or opposition movement. In other words, they're not a political threat. As to their beliefs, they simply believe that all religions are from one and the same God, that revelation is progressive, and that the purpose of religion is to bring forth in each one of us the capacities to serve humanity. The Baha'i community, and I mentioned this for a specific purpose, is a worldwide community. There are Baha'is from every background, living in every corner of the world. Even though the origins of the Baha'i faith are in Iran, the overwhelming majority of Baha'is are non-Iranian. This is to say that the Baha'is have no claims with regard to the Iranian government. Speaking of the origins of the Baha'i faith, Baha'is have been persecuted since its inception in the 18th century. Well, 19th century, 1800s. However, the official nature of the persecution came to light with a government memorandum of 91. And this is a government memorandum that really establishes what is called a policy, and they call it on the Baha'i question. And it has been signed by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And it gives explicit instructions to ensure that the progress and development of the Baha'i community be blocked. And this government memorandum has been brought to light by the former UN Special Representative on Iran. This means that the persecutions since the revolution are an official government policy. They're government-led, they're intentional, they're systematic, they seep from the highest authorities down to all levels of administration, whether national or communal. They're led, they're executed, and put into place by all bodies and agencies of the government. And last but not least, they concern every area of life. Baha'is do not only not have the right to be Baha'is and to practice their faith, they are also stripped of all other civil rights. In other words, Baha'is do not only not exist in the Constitution as a religious minority, they don't exist at all. With regard to the right of liberty, at all points in times, there's around 80 to 100 Baha'is in prison, solely and clearly because of their beliefs. And this new number includes the 7 Baha'i leaders that I'm sure most of us have heard about, but also mothers and at times infants. During the debriefing of this Iran delegation visit to Iran, I was told that whenever the question of the Baha'is in prison was brought up, the authorities would simply say, look, they're in prison because they have committed some crime. Then if they have committed a simple crime, why are they charged with charges such as belonging to an illegal association, furthering the aims of a deviant sect, or spreading corruption on earth? If they have been charged with a simple crime, why have they been charged by the revolutionary courts and not simply by the criminal courts? Why are they in the political sections of the prison and not simply in the criminal sections? Members of the Baha'i faith have been denied access to higher education since the revolution. And this also is an official government policy. The 91 memo I just mentioned indicates, for example, that the government keep the Baha'is illiterate and uneducated. It says they must be expelled from universities, either in the admission process or during the course of their studies, once it becomes known that they're Baha'is. In 2006, a letter from the Central Security Office to the Ministry of Science, Research and Technology, addressed to 81 universities, which are all named, instructed them to expel any student discovered to be a Baha'i at the time of enrollment or during his or her studies. Naturally, the Baha'is in Iran will not accept that their children are left uneducated. So they took old professors that had been, fired from their jobs, and they created a very informal sort of distance learning system where people were able to receive some level of education. These people were never promised that they would receive an official degree, nor did they promised any other prospects of employment. However, the government has even declared this very informal system as illegal. Now, this effort to intellectually extinguish the Baha'i community is accompanied by a wider effort to strangulate the community economically. So Baha'is are not allowed employment in the public sector. they're also not allowed employment in a number of other sectors. And there's a document from the Public Places Supervision Office that gives orders to deny Baha'is work permits in over 25 kind of specifically listed businesses. And just to, out of interest, I looked at the list, and so Baha'is can't be occupied in sectors such as jewelry and watchmaking, coffee shops, engraving, car rentals, or tailoring training institutes, and the list continues. Now, if you combine this with the fact that Baha'is are not allowed to study and as such access a certain number of employment types, if you combine all of this, all that's left to the Baha'is is have private sort of small shops and businesses. And now even that is being systematically denied to them. And the government really has organized raids to close down around recently 80 shops throughout the country on legally very suspicious grounds. All these efforts are clearly meant to strangulate the community and really leave them with nothing left to survive. There's many other restrictions to the rights of the Baha'is, and there's really no time to go into them. Earned pensions are denied. There's property that's confiscated. Cemeteries are regularly desecrated. Holy places destroyed. Houses raided. And the right to inherit is systematically denied. But just to say that since Mr. Rohani took office, not only has there been no improvement, there actually has been a significant increase in, for example, anti-Baha'i propaganda in government-controlled or government-sponsored media. There have been more than 7,000 articles, videos, and web pages appearing in that sort of media. And the level of the kind of propaganda that's there is actually, it's quite interesting. It goes from, accusations of being spies to really warning women in subway station of Baha'i women who are told to come and, ask them to do manicure and bewitch them. So it takes all sorts of levels of, from very primitive to slightly more sophisticated. Two concluding remarks. And we always mention this. So now we can't say whether this lack of improvement is due to Mr. Rohani's not being able or unwilling to do anything about it. And fundamentally, it really doesn't matter at this stage. If he is not able, if international pressure is put on him, this will help him. If he's unwilling, well, it will make him do something. So our point is really that international pressure is the only thing at this stage that works. And it really constitutes a key factor in protecting the Baha'is and other populations in Iran. Iran's sincerity in wanting to address its human rights situation can easily be measured by the government's willingness to change its policies with regard to the Baha'is. It's not difficult. It doesn't sort of ask for major constitutional changes to implement some human rights improvements. So all we call on, what we call on, is really on businesses seeking to engage with Iran to raise the issue of human rights. And we call on member states and the European Union to ensure that really Iran lives up to its international commitments.
Thank you very much for your excellent speech. Now I give the floor to Mrs. Zawa Farzan.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Member of Parliament, Mr. Belder, and Daniel and his team, not only for their efforts for this event today, but also their leadership on the issue of human rights and the state of the civil society in Iran. And Rachel really laid the groundwork very precisely in how the abuses look like in the Islamic Republic. And I want to continue a little bit in sort of sharing a snapshot of what Iran looks like today, that it is not the case that we have suddenly woken up and Iran has become the Middle Eastern Switzerland. On the contrary, it's really the case that for Iran civil society, the repression under Rohani and under Zarif, because it is ultimately the repression under Khamenei, is even worse now than it was during the time of Ahmadinejad, and I think that says a lot. And what Rachel explained is really how the totalitarian aspect of those abuses that are going on, and it affects religious minorities, it affects homosexuals, it affects political dissidents, and it affects every single Iranian who has an idea of individual happiness, of individual rights, of the right to choose their own partner, the right to express their own and free opinion. And now that the Munich Security Conference has concluded, and we all witnessed ahead of Valentine's Day the love fest between Federica Mogherini and Mohammad Javad Zarif. Excuse my cynicism, it is really the only way to deal with this issue. I really want to take a quote from Mrs. Mogherini, with all due respect, and show you how detached from reality it actually really is. Mrs. Mogherini closed her remarks about the nuclear deal, about the nuclear agreement, in saying that this is not only a nuclear deal, it is about the future of Iran. It is about how will Iran look like 10 years from now, because it has a very young and educated generation, which is absolutely true. And let me share a very concrete example with